gentlemen, my name is Gary Funk. I'm the Director of Choral Activities at the University of Montana and the Director of the Vienna Experience here. Before I introduce our special guest for the evening, I would like to thank President George Dennison for his support of this wonderful series of lectures, and also Richard Drake, who does such a terrific job. This weekend is a very special weekend for Missoula, especially for the Missoula Symphony Orchestra, because it's celebrating its 50th anniversary of the founding of the orchestra. In celebration of this event, the Missoula Symphony Chorus and Orchestra, along with the Flathead Community Chorus, will be joined by 4 soloists from around the country to perform the beautiful Ninth Symphony of Ludwig van Beethoven. The ensemble will also be performing the Liebeslieder waltzes of Johannes Brahms, both composers from Vienna. A very special feature of the Brahms choir will be the joining of the Rocky Mountain Ballet Theater dancing to the Brahms Liebeslieder waltzes to the choreography of Charlene Campbell. The Saturday night concert is scheduled for 7:30 p.m. in University Theater. The Sunday performance will begin at 3. This evening's presidential election will be presenting pre-concert lectures right before those concerts on Saturday night at 6:30 and Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Tonight's presidential lecturer is no stranger to the University of Montana, although she's never been on this campus before. She's no stranger because for some 20 years she has served as the Art and Architecture lecturer for the Vienna Experience. Every 3 years, 45 students or so spend 3 months in Vienna. Will be going again in 2006. Our guest invites those students to meet her in front of the Kunsthistorische Museum, which is the Art History Museum, or the Belvedere Museum, or the Leopold Museum, and the list goes on, to climb the stairs and to go towards and in front of a beautiful original painting of some famous artist. And she has the incredible ability to take them past the surface of the canvas into the painting so they can understand what genius is presented there. Our students return from this experience thrilled with the opportunity to go there, and almost to the person, the students say the following: Dr. Cynthia Prossinger is the best teacher I've ever had. So will you join me, please, in welcoming to Missoula to the University of Montana, all the way from Vienna, Austria, our presidential lecturer for this evening, Dr. Cynthia Prossinger.
Introduction. I'm so overwhelmed to be here, absolutely overwhelmed. I want to mention something that a former Montana University student in the Vienna program said to me. He had to do an initial description of a painting in the Kunsthistorische Museum, and he chose Peter Bruegel's Autumn Landscape. And he had to give a reason why he chose this mountainous landscape. And he said, it reminded me of home. He brought Missoula to Vienna to me, and now I hope I may do the inverse and bring Vienna to Missoula. And so we will begin. Gustav Klimt's Beethoven Frieze as a visual representation of secessionist ideology in Vienna 1900. The arts lead us to an ideal kingdom, the sole place wherein we can find pure joy, pure happiness, and pure love. In the catalog of the 14th Secessionist exhibition, visitors were presented with a detailed literal explanation of Gustav Klimt's visual interpretation of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and what the composer's musical message meant for the secessionist artistic movement in general. They wrote a detailed description for the visitors. Everything was explained to them because the secessionists felt Vienna did not know what modern art was. They were going to show them what modern art was. And this scene that you see here is the last scene of the Beethoven Frieze, the pure happiness, pure joy, and true love that you can only find, the Secessionists felt, through Beethoven and the arts. The proclamation that the arts lead us to complete happiness and fulfillment was in turn based on Richard Wagner's well-known exposition on Beethoven, in which he equates Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the biblical quotation, "Mein Reich ist nicht von dieser Welt." Mein kingdom is not of this world. The secessionist creed of liberating mankind from the strife and vices of modern civilization parallels the Wagnerian interpretation of Beethoven, and to even a more substantial extent, Gustav Mahler's reading of both Wagner and Beethoven. And you have here, during the time of the Ringstrasse, 19th century Vienna, the time of Richard Wagner's interpretations of Beethoven, the cult around Beethoven already unfolding, and this statue can be seen across from the Konzerthaus in Vienna. Nope, that's not right. The cultural and political matrix from which the secession movement emerged was both ambivalent and multifaceted. The founding of the secession in 1898 may be seen as a youthful rebellion against the patrician-dominated world, or as a revolution against the historicist Ringstrasse era. And you are looking at this confrontation. To the left, with the beautiful blue Vienna sky, you have the Palace Athena, the protectress of the arts and wisdom, on the Ringstrasse in front of the Parliament, and you have Gustav Klimt's 1900 answer to that. A very femme fatale, quite aggressive looking, very dangerous for the male sex, Palace Athena. And she's holding something very different in her hands. She's holding up to you the nuda veritas, the naked truth, with a mirror in her hand, and she's holding it up to the public. And the Medusa head on the shield of Pallas Athena by Gustav Klimt is sticking her tongue out at you. So this is the contrast. They may be rebelling against just this. However, I said it was ambivalent. It is not as simple as that. At the same time, the secessionist movement, which not just professed but practiced respect for the applied arts, may be seen as a consequential continuum spanning from Biedermeier domesticity of the early 19th century via the Ringstrasse's synthesis of industry and the arts in the late 19th century and surfacing to a modern style for modern living in 1900 Vienna. And you see that here also. Although this seems to be a contrast, at the same time, they have something in common. On the left-hand side, a Ringstrasse palace, a salon, where everything is designed, the wall surfaces, the lamp, and on the other side, Vienna 1900, answer to that, a beautiful hall in the house of Stocklet, designed by the Viennese workshops, 1900. They cultivated industry in the arts. They cultivated an interest in the applied arts, but they reinterpreted this tradition. And this is how they did it. We have on the left-hand side a magnificent wrought iron, gilded gateway to the Hofburg of the late 19th century Ringstrasse style in Vienna. And on the other side, a beautiful silver piece designed by Kolomose and the Viennese workshops, 1900 Vienna, in interest in handwork. And if you notice, please, the lamp on the Ringstrasse Hofburg gateway is the crown of Austria. And of course, the Secessionists use much different type of forms. You're going to see how they modernize them. But the interest in the applied arts is already there in the late 19th century. The Secession building, designed by the talented Otto Wagner protégé Joseph Maria Olbrich, set the architectural stage for the ensuing exhibitions, foremost among them the Beethoven exhibition 1902-1903. Otto Wagner said of his protégé, who built the exhibition hall for the Secessionists, who needed an exhibition hall because they protested against the Academy, they walked out of the fine arts jury program and needed an exhibition hall. And they said over their doorway, to each art, age its art, to art its freedom. We are now going to make a very new style. We are throwing off the throes of historicism and making a new modern style. To each age its art, to art its freedom. And Otto Wagner said of his protégé, I quote him, this has something to do with music, that the draftsman Olbrich, Otto Wagner praised his graphic talent, his musical temperament, and his lively fantasy. He does not give a dome on the Secession building as some people think it is. He gives a laurel leaf jewel, inset like a ruby in a ring, or a gold inset of laurel leaves. And what did the Viennese say about it? Because it's right near the Naschmarkt, right near the open marketplace. They said it's a cabbage head. And they said it's so appropriate that the Secessionists, the protesters, are embellishing their building with a cabbage head. But they were very interesting. This is how the Viennese cope with something like this. There was a traffic jam right in front of this building when it was being put up. It was so different than the Ringstrasse, so different than they'd ever seen ever before. A lot of people do not know what they also equated with it, the Hochofen. A Hochofen is a steelworks, a smelting pot. They thought it was industrial looking. So this is their hall, and this is the place where the Beethoven exhibit 1902 took place. Under the guidance of their first president, Gustav Klimt, the artists aimed at creating a new framework for their exhibitions. This exhibition hall, nothing like this was ever seen before in Vienna. The design and use of virtual space played a major role in portrayal of a specific theme in an exhibit. The Secessionists practiced a full doctrine of Raumkunst, spatial art. That's very, very modern. That happened in the 1960s later on, which gradually developed into a type of Tempelkunst, a temple art, culminating in their heroic Beethoven presentation. And you can see it is like a temple of the arts. And I'm going to take you through this building visually. And you're going to go up the stairs, and you're going to open the door, which is copper. And please notice the copper nails attaching the copper design to the wooden door. Do you need that many nails? No, it's part of the design. The useful item is seen, and as Otto Wagner said, the teacher of Olbrich, something impractical can't be beautiful. The practical is beautiful. We don't camouflage it, we use it as part of the design. And so the copper nails are used profusely to give a design to the door. And I'm going to take you around the sides of the Secession so you can understand why Otto Wagner said, my student, this young Joseph Maria Olbrich, has a graphic fantasy, has a musical temperament, the tree growing up the side. And I'm going to let you read the motto, another motto of the movement, Ver Sacrum, Holy Spring. And that's why this vegetation is growing up the sides of this white temple-like exhibition hall. It's a new spring. It's a new beginning. The Secessionists were able to finance their independent exhibition building through the proceeds gained from the opening show on Park Ring, for which Gustav Klimt, whom you see as a photograph here to the left, designed the poster on the right, Theseus overcoming the centaur, a veritable metaphor of the secessionist combative spirit. They felt they were the young god of youth, Theseus, overcoming the very imbecile, drunken centaur. And they're shown doing that with their protectress of the arts, Pallas Athena, making another face at you, by the way, with the Medusa head. And she is going to protect this movement, and this movement is combative, is a bit aggressive, right? They're fighting for what they believe in. I want to note, however, not surprisingly, Klimt's first version of the poster, this is the first version, so please take a look. I'm going to ask you a question in just a minute. Klimt's first version of the poster was submitted to censorship, and the Bureau asked him to do something. His second design placed a silhouetted tree over the detail that had caused offense. So you can imagine where the tree came into being, all right? And they couldn't post it over the city until it had passed censorship. The steel industrialist, Karl Wittgenstein, provided the financial aid necessary for the secessionists to purchase the building site right in the backyard, so to speak, of the Academy of Fine Arts on Schillerplatz. And on the left, you have that academy. And right at the back doorstep, what an affront, they placed their own exhibition hall in protest. And beautiful, by the way, is the architecture of the Ringstrasse here. Theodor von Hansen, please, built the building. He came from Copenhagen. He built the Musikverein in Vienna also, many other buildings. He's using, however, historicist style in Neo-Renaissance with beautiful gilded window panes, as you see, with lovely decoration. But what an affront, and what modernism. Next to it, at the back door, is this white building with plain walls, looking at them, reminding them that this group of young, talented people broke away from that institution. Karl Wittgenstein, the industrialist, whom you see here on the left, a wonderful photograph of a very determined personality, by the way. Karl Wittgenstein, he was the father of Ludwig Wittgenstein, the great mathematician and philosopher, and also of Paul. And Karl Wittgenstein was an enthusiastic art and music composer who was known for always taking his violin with him on business trips. Brahms was a welcome guest and frequent guest at the Wittgenstein family, and that is the cue for our choir to give you a Brahms presentation.
We're going to give you an introduction of about 13 measures of the piece preceding the feature of our part of the evening. This is a gigantic fugue in D major, in which Brahms uses a pedal tone, D, reiterated over and over every beat of this piece. Underneath, changing keys and lovely melodies. But here is this D, pervasive, persistent, providing security, stability. It ends. And by a stroke of amazing genius, only by moving up a half step to the key of E flat, Brahms removes us from this universe that we inhabit to someplace entirely different. and totally appropriate to the Romantic period. The first words uttered by the chorus are, "How lovely."
not of this world. And Karl Wittgenstein hosted Brahms at his house. On the other side, you see a precious item made personally for Karl Wittgenstein for his dining room table for mustard. And we know the production numbers, by the way, of the workshops, the Viennese workshops, and only one item was made, just for Karl Wittgenstein. Out of thankfulness, of course, for his supportive help in building the Secession building. Centering on Max Klinger's Beethoven monument, which you see here, the Secessionist artist strove to create an artistic milieu worthy of the sculptor's Kultbild. It really is a cult figure here whom you see. I heard a rehearsal, by the way, for Beethoven's Ninth, and the conductor, Henry, said, "What? Choir, Beethoven is shaking his fist at you." And exactly how the Viennese interpreted him at this time. Max Klinger was working on this statue in Leipzig, and one of the members of the Secessionist movement, Karl Moll, who was a painter himself, he was the emissary for the Secessionist movement in different countries in Europe. He tried for international contacts, and he became interested in Klinger's Beethoven project already 1900, 2 years before the exhibit took place. The artist hadn't finished the sculpture until 1 week before the exhibit opened in Vienna. It's gigantic. He's monumental. It is marble. It is bronze. It is ivory. And I have a detail here of the eagle at his feet. Very imperial looking, very precious. So something, how do you conceive a place worthy of this statue? And this is the first time that you have a concept exhibit. One theme, one place, Raumkunst, and now we have to make the space to match Beethoven and this monument to him. How are you going to do this? Their task was to unite all parts of the exhibition into a harmonious whole. Timeless and eternal, like Zeus by Phidias, Klinger's Beethoven should enjoy the appropriate architectural framework, which would enhance the sense of religious awe emanating from the statue. Now, this Zeus statue by Phidias, which really Klinger is thinking about when he's creating his Beethoven, is only known from descriptions that have survived. It was a great gold and ivory statue, and that's why Max Klinger is using different materials here, very rich materials for his Beethoven. It graced the middle hall, the cella, of the Zeus temple in Olympia. Zeus sat enthroned, holding a Nike figure, a peace figure in one hand, and a scepter, and an eagle in the other. The armrests and the sides of the throne were decorated with young men being attacked by sphinxes. The cult statue of Zeus was eventually taken to Constantinople and burnt in the palace in fire in 475 AD. Artists knew of the statue. Everyone is trying to imitate Phidias, and this is what Klinger created as an answer to antiquity for Beethoven. Document descriptions of the ivory and gold colossal statue of Zeus in the Temple of Olympia report, this is very important, that the cult statue added much to the accepted religion and that whoever had seen it would never be unhappy again. And that's exactly what Klinger wanted to produce. A statue that you looked at and you would never be unhappy again thinking of Beethoven. Similarly, the artists of the Secession practiced their profession as a belief with a calling, to imbue their exhibitions with a new consciousness, an ideology of pure love, joy, and happiness. Alfred Rohler and Joseph Hofmann, members of the Secessionist movement, conceived a most convincing stage for the statue's display. On one side, on your left, you have, I'm sorry, it doesn't look very clear because it's a documentary photograph. The Secessionists made sure that they documented their exhibits. This is exactly what it looked like. And as you can see, in the side room, and this is where the Beethoven frieze is, there's a partition. It's left open so that ever present is Max Klinger's Beethoven statue. You could see it from everywhere in the exhibit. And on the other side, you have Alfred Rohler, who, by the way, did the scenes and the scenery for Gustav Mahler's productions of his operas at the Vienna State Opera House 4 years long. There's a poster here called The Descending Night, and it was the poster for the Beethoven exhibit, but what has been lost to us is the backdrop for the Beethoven statue you just saw with Descending Night. This figure was repeated over 10 times to the right and left of Max Klinger's statue in the background, the Descending Night. In front of him was the dawn. All of these makeshift frescoes were dismantled and lost. Thankfully, we have Gustav Klimt's contribution to the exhibit. Olbricht's basilica-like temple of the arts, whose walls he himself described as white and pristine, do you understand there is now a love for the empty space? This Secession Hall inside is still housing the most modern exhibits in Vienna today, and any contemporary artist still fits into this framework. Here again, you have two documentary photographs of the statue and of the statue as it appears from the Beethoven frieze room designed by Joseph Hofmann. The code of the exhibition design seemed to be an admiration for amor vacui, the love of the empty space, as opposed to the Ringstrasse interiors where you filled up everything, and now you can finally breathe. A love of the empty space that gave the visitors room to breathe. A positive attitude towards the aesthetics of the void, how modern can you be, was a resting place for the eyes. Thus, the visitor could enjoy the freedom of uncluttered architectural space. In keeping with this code, Klimt did not fill the pictorial space of his frieze, but accentuated the narrative with well-placed pauses, like rests in a musical composition. You will see here, I know it isn't very clear for you because it's a documentary photograph on the right, part of the frieze, in which the longings and desires stop suddenly, and you see there's nothing. There's nothing that he painted on that surface right near me, because you're supposed to read within the frieze Beethoven. So through poetry and the arts and Beethoven, you arrive at the temple. And we're going to see this sequence very clearly, very soon. Joseph Hofmann was responsible for the design of the Beethoven room, which you see here, where the visitor encountered Klimt's frieze on the first stage of his pilgrimage through the exhibition. Hofmann believed that the visitor should not be confronted with the main work immediately upon entry, but should gradually be led towards it. By slightly elevating the two oblong rooms, like this one here on your left, and by allowing one wall of each room to open into the main room housing the Beethoven statue, Hofmann gave the visitor the opportunity of first viewing Klinger's masterpiece from a distance. You don't approach it immediately. Now, Klinger, when he was working on his statue, and this has been documented, had ideally shown Beethoven having conquered his weakness and, despite a certain opposition, had become a true hero, outwardly showing a newfound strength with his clenched fists and a determined demeanor. So this is exactly how he wrote, and that is a quotation, by the way, from Thomas Mann, 1906. It's very interesting. There has been new research done on how modern is modern art in Vienna 1900. Please look at the photograph on your right. That is a supraporta, over the door decoration that you see on your left, but it's totally abstract. It is much earlier than the constructivist movement in Russia in 1910, and it's 1902, Vienna. But it's used as a decoration over the door of the Beethoven exhibit. Hofmann's architectural framework helped to underline the importance of Beethoven as a cult figure. Hofmann created peaceful rooms exuding quiet simplicity in his light yellow-gray interior. Now, what you see here is a reconstruction for an exhibit 1985, Dream and Reality, where a postmodern architect in Vienna decided he's going to reconstruct the rooms to house the Beethoven frieze and show it for the first time since 1975. In a constructed manner. And this is exactly the tone of the walls. They weren't cold white, they were yellow white. They had an aura about them. In his light yellow-gray interior, Klimt's frieze found its ideal ambience. The rough surface of the walls added a tactile quality to the interior, which remained the only architectural accent. Nothing was left to chance. Every artwork on display had its allocated place. Placed in square-shaped niches along the walls, the works of other masters were inserted and did not disrupt the visual continuity which would celebrate its finale in the Beethoven statue. The theme of the Beethoven frieze has its overture in a stream of slender figures symbolizing the longings and desires of mankind. Now, this is the interpretation given to you in the catalog. You are now 1902 visitors of the Beethoven exhibit. The first room you're confronted with is the Klimt room with this frieze. And the first image on the wall you see, and you read in your catalog very nicely, your longings and your desires. This is why you came to the exhibit, because you want them to be subdued. And the Secessionists are going to show you how to really suppress your longings and desires and to arrive at the kingdom of joy. And notice what he does with the space. No Ringstrasse decorator would do this with an interior in the late 19th century. You have this love of nothingness. Above this white wall, a string of long, connected figures. These sleep-drunken figures continue to float above a white void in an endless string, hovering ever present over a woeful humanity that you see on the left, seeking pity and protection behind the golden armored hero. Standing steadfaced like a pharaoh in Egyptian relief, he's about to take up his sword against the typhon. Now this is extremely interesting because we have also brought down to us what Nietzsche says and felt about Richard Wagner's relationship. And he said, Wagner, as you know, was a revolutionary. He had to leave Dresden because he was a revolutionary. And he had become a revolutionary because of his pity for humanity. So over there you have poor, pitiful humanity. That's all of you. And you're getting your protection behind the knight, which is part of the arts. And he's going to take up the battle for you. And I would like you to look at the details of the armory. Because before Gustav Klimt got this commission, he was working in the Kunsthistorische Museum, and he was decorating the walls and the stairwell room with historicist quotations from the Habsburg collection. He spent hours copying the old masters in order to do this project. And this has something to do with our beautiful Siegfried Knight here, who's going to protect us And that suit of armor comes from the armory collection of the Habsburgs. Right here is the suit of armor that Gustav Klimt was inspired by in every detail. The breastplate, the beautiful gloves that he's wearing are taken from the Habsburg collection. So he's using what he learned actually in his earlier commissions. Now, as I said, the knight is going to take up his battle, and I'm quoting, "For poor humanity." Here you have the details of the workmanship. By the way, this was put up very, very quickly. It's al secco, it's on a dry surface, it's on a makeshift reed background, just to be temporary. And he's working with very simple materials here and very quickly. And he's working on scaffolding and doing it directly on the wall. He finished, by the way, one day before the exhibit opened. Poor, pitiful humanity. The young girl, please, behind the couple. All of these studies were done carefully in drawings by Gustav Klimt and from models, please. Directly from models. So, this knight is going to combat. And he's going to combat against and take up his sword against Typhon, the largest beast ever born. He's on the left. A monster with ludicrous mother-of-pearl eyes, mother-of-pearl inserts, dangly hairy ape arms, and coiled serpent appendages. And now I'm going to quote Robert Graves. He wrote about the Greek myths, and he describes Typhon for you. And please look at his eyes. In revenge for the destruction of the giants, Mother Earth brought forth Typhon, the largest monster ever born. From the thighs downward, he was nothing but coiled serpents, and his arms outspread reached 100 leagues in either direction. His brutish ass head touched the stars, and his vast wings darkened the sun. Fire flashed from his eyes, and flaming rocks hurled from his mouth, and when he came rushing towards Olympus, the gods fled in terror. Now, why did Gustav Klimt choose this wall? You see, it's very different than the others. And actually, it's a caricature of the public. What is he doing? At this point in the narrative, the allegory becomes a personal reference to Klimt's relationship with a hostile general public. Before the Beethoven exhibit, Klimt's ceiling paintings for the faculties for the university aula had been displayed in the Secession, and they're here on the right. Unfortunately, they were destroyed in 1945 in the last days of the war and the bombing of Vienna. That's why we only have here black and white photographs here. The Vienna University's professors had denounced and subsequently rejected them vehemently. In protest, the Secessionists supported Klimt's pictorial interpretations of these 4 studies of academe in symbolic form. Now you have 2 of them here. The one on the left is medicine, and the one on the right is law, where actually the accused in the foreground, you have sympathy for him. The judge is away in the background, like Byzantine emperors, and you have pity for the accused. And on the other side, the medical doctors said, what about their medicine? That can't be us. That's so fateful, that's so Nietzschean, that's so werden and vergehen. You're born, you're dead, and we can't help them. And one figure has set herself free from the stream of life, and that floating figure, you're going to see what is done with it. Karl Schorsky aptly describes the artist's conflict with the commissioners and claims that it marks the birth of Klimt as a social, psychological, social subversive. He takes up the fight now. It was his rendering of medicine and philosophy that triggered the most vocal disapproval of the academics, which eventually gave way to cold condemnation. And I would like to show you what has become of this figure. On my side, you see the original oil sketch that Gustav Klimt did for the design of medicine, with this sleep-drunken girl trying to break away from this stream of life. The postmodern architect in Vienna, when we had a Dream and Reality exhibit in 1985 in Vienna, revived this floating figure and placed it in an overdimensional, sleep-drunken type of form on the Künstlerhaus where the exhibit was taking place. And that's what you see there. So what actually Hollein was doing is reviving something that the Viennese had rejected, and he was just waiting in the sidelines for them to reject it again. And what happened to this, by the way, this is the drawing, whoops. Okay, this is the drawing that, that's not here. This is the drawing that Klimt did for the figure. And what happened when Hollein put up that figure overlarge on the Künstlerhaus, I will just tell you, they said it's costly kitsch in pretentiously bad taste, and they pointed out that this tingle-tangle had cost the state over 12 million Austrian shillings, almost 1 million euros today. So actually the public hadn't changed very much. Oh dear, what's happening here? Okay. No, what I want to do is this. Okay. Fine. The giant monster typhoon, as destructive as the hurricane wind named after him, may be equated with the artist himself mimicking his grotesque critics. And you have that again on the left. The three Gorgon sisters accompanying him, not just the Medusa had snake hair, but also her sisters, are seen here in a detail on my side, crowned with allegories of sickness, insanity, and death, accompanied the monster against which the knight Siegfried was to combat. The vices have been fittingly characterized visually. And you see the vices, please. You can identify gluttony very easily. And one is voluptuousness and lasciviousness. Voluptuousness is red-haired, crouching, and a sensual nude. Lasciviousness, a complacently pleased with herself blonde beauty. Do you see her? And intemperance or gluttony, an obese pseudo-odalisque. Please look at her headdress. By the way, her headdress is just made of curtain rings. And anxiety, whom we don't see here yet, is a black-veiled, gaunt, gnawing figure. The genius of the Beethoven Frieze allegories is well documented in thousands, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of preliminary drawings that Klimt used and reused, altered and rejected as work progressed. We know a friend of his told the story that he was on the scaffolding in the Beethoven room, and he had a stack of these drawings done from live models. You can imagine how many nymphs he had in his studio. And he reused them, he rejected them, he reused them, he rejected them. And this is how he worked. A founding member of the Secession and Klimt's friend and colleague, Remigius Geiling, creates a delightful pictorial parody of the public's perception of Gustav Klimt at work. Wait a minute. These are the drawings, please, as you see. There. Thank you for laughing. And I'll give you my description. Perched around the artist on the scaffolding, like dainty birds from a lost Eden, tempting nudes are handing him tablets of forbidden fruit and wine. Geiling is poking fun at the public's own sexual fantasies and their more than naive view of how an artist proceeds with his work. Highly erotic artist-model relationships were not uncommon, nor the norm. Klimt did, however, I may note, jot down the name and address of his model for Juliet when he was doing a Shakespeare theme. So very often he put down their address. But it didn't mean that he worked this way. Another story is very interesting that I need to tell you, that a Graf, now he's a lord, was able to, a few people were invited before the opening of the Beethoven exhibit to see Klimt at work. And a Graf came in, took one look at the frieze, said a number of S words, turned his back on his heels, and left. What did Klimt do? He looked down and smiled and nodded and turned around and started working again. So this is the view of how the Viennese felt he was working. Please do notice how he abstracts. This is anxiety, where the coiled serpent appendages are of Typhon. Notice that he's using here a girl. You can identify how realistic this is and how he stylizes and reduces to get an extreme abstract allegory. Watch what happens. He even uses a male figure and combines the two. Anxiety is the product of a very emaciated young woman and an older male figure. And that's how he produces his allegories. Lasciviousness. He preferred red-haired models very often, by the way. And here you can see the anxiety. Whoever composed the allegorical program for the Beethoven Frieze certainly based it on his interpretation of Wagnerian and Nietzschean thought. Richard Wagner was a long-life admirer of Beethoven, whom he not just saw as a tonal poet, but also as a godlike hero. Beethoven, who lived in isolation and continued his work under difficult conditions, became the artist's icon. For Wagner, the Ninth Symphony was not just music, but the demonstration of the solution to the puzzle of life in musical tones. The Frieze proclaims the redeeming aspect of music and the visual arts and their salutary function for mankind. It is also highly probable that Max Klinger, who reputedly was inspired to execute the Beethoven monument while playing piano, felt that the composer represented a type of Über-Ich and Übermensch. The imposing throne of Beethoven is decorated with bronze reliefs showing Adam and Eve. Please note this Christian connotation here, this spiritualization of Beethoven, and the fateful struggle for knowledge that finds its peace only in love, represented by the goddess Venus. On the backside of the altar to Beethoven, all right, the statue. I'm calling it an altar, as you see. Okay. The imposing throne of Beethoven is decorated with bronze reliefs, and on the backside, he combined the crucifixion of Christ with the mythical redemption through love in the relief on the back of the Beethoven's throne, Venus and the crucifixion of Christ together in one theme. Once again, it is something of a crusade that the secessionists have sought to undertake, identifying their campaign for the good of mankind with Beethoven's plight, suffering, and misery. And through this crusade, through the combating of the vices and the Typhon, you reach finally through Beethoven and music and the arts and the secessionists this last embrace. Through poetry on the left, you arrive at the temple of joy. 1902-1903 was not just the year of the Beethoven exhibit, but also the founding of the Viennese workshop, the Wiener Werkstätte. Joseph Hofmann and Kola Mose conceived the idea of an artistic community, uniting display and sales rooms with the actual production workshops. It was Klimt who professed that creation is dual-fold. This is very important. Art is the ideal union between the artist and the admirer. And by the way, the word in German is wonderful, genieße. He's the one who has pleasure. So without you, the secessionists cannot exist. The Wiener Werkstätte cannot exist unless they have admirers. And Gustav Klimt knew that very well. Kolomose, the friend of Gustav Klimt and Joseph Hofmann, designed the Neustiftgasse. Here is on my side, the documented photograph of how the entrance looked in the very beginning. And on the other side, the room that you entered to purchase something from the Viennese workshops, where a prospective customer would be able to choose from an archive of designs executed in a wealth of materials and colors. Hofmann's, you're all going to want to take this home with you. On the left, Joseph Hofmann's silver pepper and paprika shaker. It was for goulash. Yeah, right over there on the side. It's for mixed pepper and paprika. Designed in 1903 for the Wittgenstein family again, here we have it, has the appearance of a rocket ready to launch. It's so modern. On the lined paper, Hofmann was known to sketch simple designs in pencil. These he later presented to the Wiener Werkstätte for production. The artists of the Wiener Werkstätte strove to revive the handicraft preferred to produce one good piece in 10 days instead of 10 pieces in one day. And that's why this paprika pepper shaker, they made 4 of them. And that's it. Industrialization had already transformed the Habsburg monarchy and its social fabric, yet it was their belief that the machine should not be tyrannical ruler, but the helpful servant of the artists and designers. The form should not be dictated by machine constraints, but originate from the creative spirit of the artist. The Wiener Werkstätte Cooperative strove to rescue artistic craftsmanship from the aesthetic devaluation through mass reproduction. All objects produced by the Wiener Werkstätte carried the monogram WW Wiener Werkstätte and the initials of both designer and executor, emphasizing the feeling of democratic equality among the artists. A current exhibition of silver pieces in the Wiener Werkstätte at the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna attempts to demonstrate how the artists of 1900 Vienna took their inspiration from the craftsmen of Vienna of the early 19th century of the Biedermeier. And on your left, it's hard to believe, you have a sugar container, by the way, under lock and key, all right, for 1810 Vienna, where Joseph Hofmann said, Biedermeier was our Erzieher. The Biedermeier was our tutor. We look back to the Biedermeier, to our grandfathers, and not our fathers of the Ringstrasse, but way back to 1800 Vienna. We're going to simplify the form as he did here on my side. It was just like Otto Wagner's premise that we're going to put the practical in form. Originally, the Wiener Werkstätte wanted to produce everyday objects for everyday man, using simple, inexpensive materials. However, everyday man did not understand these pieces. Not the material from the object was made, but rather the workmanship and the modern design gave the value to the product. Alas, the Wiener Werkstätte was unsuccessful in convincing the general public that their unornamented art was exquisite enough to be considered representational. The Wiener Werkstätte remained until its final closing in 1932 a source of unique objects for a few sympathizing yet nonetheless notable families like the Wittgensteins and the Van Dorfers and the Kohns and the Stoneboroughs and Gustav Mahler. This piece on my side, please, you can see the initials. Alma Maria Mahler. On the 24th of December, 1902, Gustav Mahler presented this Wiener Werkstätte piece. Only one of it was produced, one of them, to his wife on Christmas Eve in Austria, in Europe. We give our presents on Christmas Eve. And Karl Wittgenstein ordered for his very talented son, Paul Wittgenstein, a sport prize, a trophy, and a thermometer here where you can see at the very bottom all of the markings, Wiener Werkstätte, executor, designer, producer, everyone has his name on it. The applied arts are no different than the fine arts. They all are of equal quality. And that gives us now an interesting connection to music. Paul Wittgenstein, in the First World War, lost his arm, and Maurice Ravel composed piano pieces for him. And now we have Maurice Ravel, I hope. All right. I have a feeling they lost their cue. Okay.
We'll try to cool it off a little bit in here for you by singing three short pieces by Ravel. The first is called Nicolette, and it's really a Red Riding Hood sort of a story where she goes into the woods and first meets an old wolf, and he asks her to stay and go to Grandma's house, and she runs away. And if you listen really carefully, you'll actually hear the click-clack of her heels on the stones. And then a gentle young guy comes up and asks her to stay. He promises her true love, but she reluctantly refuses. And then finally an old, gray-haired man, ugly, wry, and corpulent, don't think of me, please, promises her gold, and she says, okay. The second piece is called Three Lovely Birds from Paradise. A young woman whose beloved is off fighting. It has a visit by three birds, and each of them bring a different message. And she responds each time, my love is to fighting gone. But finally, the last bird visits, and he says, your love is to fighting gone. So the connotation of the word is changed. The final is a warning from the old people of the village to the young people not to go into the woods because there are monsters there. And finally, at the end, the young people say, okay, we won't do that. So we'll sing these three pieces, Nicolette.
work of the Wiener Werkstätte is Joseph Hofmann's Palais Stoclet in Brussels. Originally, the Belgian banker Adolphe Stoclet intended to have his villa built on the Hohe Warte in Vienna, since he was so impressed by Hofmann's Moser-Moll house overlooking the city there. Unfortunately, as the plans were being made for the villa, Stoclet's father died, and the young heir was obliged to return home and assume the responsibility of managing the bank in Brussels. His departure from Vienna did not prevent Stoclet from leaving the design of his villa in Hofmann's hands. The commissioner's trust is exemplified by the blank check that the architect received from his patron. He asked Joseph Hofmann to fill in the sum when everything was finished. Furthermore, the patron and contributing artists were all in agreement with the ultimate aim of their united efforts. Art should permeate all aspects of everyday life. Stoclet believed so strongly in this aesthetic ideal that in his last express wish, as stated in his last will and testament, was to be buried with the silk handkerchief designed by Joseph Hofmann in his breast pocket. Art in life and even in afterlife, nothing should be left to chance or fate. Modern life should be artistically molded, and the objects of everyday life should reflect the commissioner's consciousness of art in life and modernism. It wasn't enough for modern man to hang walls and paintings on his walls. Every day and every step of modern life should correspond to modern thought in form and function. You see the outside of the Stoclet Villa. Brussels, unfortunately, does not have a terraced Hohe Warte like in Vienna, but still the plan for the observation tower was actually put into execution, and you see the statues decorating it. You also notice on this side, although it's actually taken before the palace was renovated, that the bronze really conforms with the geometric pattern of the building. It actually outlines the empty space, and that bronze on the left side, when it was renovated, is gilded. So this amor vacui, this love of a free space, not a decorated service, is here accentuated through the decoration of the bronze, of the gilded bronze. If you enter the villa, you have the hall on your right, and the music room is on your left, please. Every piece of furniture, every object in the Villa Stoclet, still today, is owned by the Stoclet family, by the way, and was executed by the Viennese workshops. Joseph Hofmann maintained that if an architect could not design a doorknob, well, he could not design the villa to go to it. To the artist of the Wiener Werkstätte, there was no difference between the fine arts and the applied arts. All were of equal value and status. In the Stoclet Palace, Wiener Werkstätte ideals could be realized in their totality for the first and last time. That is not a 1960s bathroom. That is 1906 Stoclet, where it really is a sort of environmental bathroom, by the way. Even the brushes that you see were designed and marked by the Viennese workshops. On the other side, you see part of the fencing. As Joseph Hofmann put it, if you cannot design a detail for the villa, you cannot design the entire villa. For the Stoclet dining room, Gustav Klimt designed the wall mosaics. Upon entering, the guest was confronted on the left wall with a long rectangular image of a highly stylized figure expressing expectation, posed next to an ornamental tree. On the opposite wall, another tree of life motif was offset by fulfillment, two embracing figures. You can see the dining room itself with the Joseph Hofmann furniture, and on one wall is expectation, on the other wall is fulfillment. And this reminds us very much of the program of the Beethoven Frieze. During his work on the designs for this commission, Klimt corresponded with his friend and girlfriend, Emilie Flöge, who managed a dress salon with her two sisters in Vienna. A series of postcards in which Klimt seeks Emilie's opinion about the designs for the Stocklet mosaics have recently been re-examined. Often she jotted down, and here is her portrait done by Gustav Klimt in one of the dresses that she designed. She often jotted down only a few words, advising him, for instance, not to be parsimonious with the use of gold. Having lost faith in public opinion since the university incident, Klimt was grateful for such encouragement. Interesting is the subject matter of the third mosaic. By the way, you have a detail here of how he works in mosaic with very inexpensive materials, and that is what he was criticized for. Now, your concentration should be on the left for a moment. You have there the figure of expectation and a very abstract figure next to her. Yes. A postcard written to Emilie Flöge during his work on the dining room mosaic reveals that Klimt depicted a highly stylized knight wearing a medieval helmet. Researchers had felt that the design was an abstract composition, which was Klimt's answer to Hofmann's Beethoven exhibition relief. However, if you look very carefully, at the very top of that abstract design, you can see a sort of very early medieval helmet. It really is Klimt showing himself as an abstract knight, like the knight of the Beethoven Frieze. We are reminded of the golden crusader taking up arms against the forces of evil in the Beethoven Frieze, and the ultimate redeeming kiss in the temple of true joy and bliss. Klimt plays the role of the knight, guarding his artistic treasure in the dining room of the Stocklet Palace. And when the designs for the Stocklet Frieze were completed, Klimt refused to display them in public, as this being a private commission, he argued that he did not need to expose himself to irate criticism again. 2 years later, Klimt paints what has been regarded as the ultimate pinnacle of his artistic endeavors, Der Kuss, the kiss, not a kiss, the kiss. In the 1985 Dream and Reality exhibition, the architect Hollein presented this painting as the icon of Jugendstil, which it has indeed become. It has an altar to it here. You look through the room to the next room, two golden frames around Gustav Klimt's Der Kuss. The embracing couple kneels on a carpet of springtime crocuses, with a seemingly infinite golden space as a backdrop. It was to be the last such embrace. Painters of the next generation, the expressionists like Egon Schiele and Oskar Kokoschka, would transform the pure joy and bliss into the frightened image of an insecure world ridden with war and destruction. The ideal kingdom so entreatingly propagated by the Secessionists in the Beethoven exhibit 1902 found its woeful end with the collapse and dissolution of the Habsburg monarchy. 1900 Vienna was preposterously insensitive to such forebodings. Karl Kraus, the satirical writer of the time, described this as the cinders smoldering in the attic, ready to burst into a fiery conflagration. I'm sorry to end on that such sad note. Thank you very much.